down to Acapulco. I know I'm headed down to Acapulco with the long white sands where I might have a chance. Yeah, we're gonna head down to Acapulco.
I have this hookup mic that I was just given. Do you want to put it on me?
Oh, well, okay, here we go.
Would you enjoy that?
We can try. Now, let me see. I'm not familiar with how we're going to do this, so you want to be heard. You might want to hold that.
Oh,
like
I don't know
this.
if I want to be heard. That doesn't sound very
then
good.
We will.
I don't want to listen to me either.
So we might want to do that. Otherwise,
I mean, I could just shout.
but then that wouldn't be good for the tape.
No,
and one
that
would
would
hear
be
you on
horrible
that.
for the tape. All right.
There we go. For the recording.
So just hold this.
Yeah, just pretend that's a handheld mic. And
Okay,
talk
cool.
that way.
Hi, guys. I am Objectivist Girl, well, the artist formerly known as Objectivist Girl. You should all start calling me Lauren Rumpler now because I just really hate the nickname Objectivist Girl. I wish I'd never done any of it sometimes, but then I remember what it taught me. And it actually got me to the point where I can make this speech, which is the culmination of everything I have learned thus far in my studies. And I'm going to preface all of this with next year, I will probably come back and tell you that absolutely everything I told you this time is totally wrong and I was totally off base and I'm changing the whole thing. So take that for what you will. Hopefully, you get a little bit of enlightenment out of it. So my story with this is I was doing Objectivist Girl and a friend of mine encouraged me to study Taoism. And so I studied the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. And Lao Tzu is a fantastic philosopher. He's considered the original anarchist. And while I was reading this, I thought, man, there is so much similarity between this and Objectivism, which ended up getting me in a humongous amount of trouble for saying that. So here's what happened. I made this video comparing Objectivism and Taoism. And it was entitled Objectivism versus Taoism. And then I came out in the video and immediately said it's actually Objectivism and Taoism. They're so similar. Taoism's got some amazing points that aren't made in Objectivism, and Objectivism has some amazing points that aren't made in Taoism. But anarchy wins out overall, so Taoism it is. So I ended up, publishing this video, and what happened was, the response I got was, oh my gosh, Objectivist Girl, how are you talking about other things that aren't Objectivism? And this made me really realize and rethink everything I was doing in my life. I thought, wow, have I rabbit-holed myself so much that that is the only thing I am allowed to talk about? And so I started really talking about Taoism. I started studying more in depth. I started a brand new channel, Lauren Rumpler Productions, so I could talk about the things that I think. Because Objectivism is a great philosophy. It's a great starting point, but it's certainly not the end-all be-all of all knowledge. And that was the biggest thing that I learned in my experience, is that it is not the end-all be-all of all knowledge. So there were two stories that really moved me when I started looking at Taoist and Eastern philosophies. And the first is the teacup story. So there was a scholar named Tokusan. And he came to the Dharma, which is the Zen teacher, and he wanted to learn and study Zen. So he came to the Dharma and he said, I would really like to study under you. Here's all the things I know. And he starts chatting about all the things he knows and carrying on about all the things he knows. And the Dharma goes over and starts to make tea. And as he makes this tea, Tokusan continues to talk and talk and talk about all the things that he knows. And the Dharma brings the tea over, and he pours the tea in his cup until it's full. Then he goes over to Tokusan's cup. All the while, Tokusan is carrying on and on about all the things that he knows. He continues to pour the tea until it starts to overflow. Tokusan says, stop. The cup is full. You cannot fill it anymore. And the Dharma said, you are like this teacup. You are already full of knowledge. You come to me full of wisdom, asking to learn. How can I fill your cup when it is already full? And this was the issue that I had with the Objectivist movement in large, because they were so set in the ways of Ayn Rand and so dogmatic about these ideas that I had to break away, as much as I respected the philosophy itself. So the second story that really resonated with me was the story of Buddha. Now, I'm not a big fan of Buddhism. I like philosophies grounded in objective reality. Buddhism is not. It's very subjective, which lends to a lot of contradictions. If you're interested in that, you can talk to me about it later. I will rant for hours about the contradictions of Buddhism. But the point is, Buddha wanted to discover what the meaning of life was. And so he spent hours sitting under this tree until he realized that he had to become the question. And I'm sure at this point you are wondering why I'm telling you these stories. These stories are the stories that made me realize how important it is to meditate. So I started martial arts, a style called Ili-chan, which is very similar to Tai Chi, only it's a little more grounded in physics, so it really appeals to my rational self. And so when I started this style, I took up meditation and started doing a lot of that. So what I learned was the best place that we can live, and what these stories teach us, is the present moment. So we spend a lot of time, we spend a ton of our time going back and forth between what's gonna happen in the future, what happened in the past, and you find people that live in the past tend to be very sad, and people who tend to live in the future are very anxious. And so you can probably figure out which one I am. Because I'm an anxious ball of energy, but I have tried so hard and am still working very hard at it, learning how to stay in that present moment. So I want to talk to you today about the present moment. And the first quote that really stuck out to me was in my Ili-chan book. So it says, "Learning is not to accumulate or imitate. It is the process of recognizing and realizing what's within. Have your attention on all your senses to turn yourself into a reflective receiver. Have a direct link to the conditions. That is, being mindful and aware of what is happening in the process of change, the cause and effect, and the cause and conditions. Maintain the moment of the process of change. Do not think or judge. Just observe and feel the way things are. With mindfulness, we learn, or we look into our body, feelings, mind, and nature." Now, this is some complicated stuff, right? So I'm going to explain to you a little bit about what that means. A reflective receiver is one who is capable of listening, and only listening. Who here knows the part of the brain that makes the human experience unique to being human? Raise your hand if you know which part of the brain that is. Okay, so it's the prefrontal cortex. And what the prefrontal cortex does, it does this really magical thing where it allows us to think about things and box it into little categories and make everything very comprehensible. But it also does this really horrible thing where you start to box yourself into biases. And you start to think a certain way, and it's very hard to get out of those little boxes that you've created. So what meditation does is it challenges you to be a reflective receiver, which is someone that is capable of listening to the world around them and just hearing the sound of water rushing by without saying, "That's water." You can hear the wind through the trees and not think, "That's the wind blowing through the trees." And what this does is it allows you to hear things and see things more clearly. And so while you're walking around in your daily life, as you meditate more and more, you start to see the things around you much more clearly. And you start to be able to make more objective judgments about reality and what's going on. Because we have such a limited focal point. We're very distracted. Most of us have intense amounts of ADD, myself included, and we just get completely distracted by the things that are going on and don't see what's right in front of us. And so when we do this, we get stuck in our biases, indoctrination, religions, philosophies, and we don't abandon concepts. And so the first thing is, I want you to learn to abandon concepts. Not because concepts are negative, they have a useful place, but when you're listening to someone argue with you and tell you that they disagree with your argument, I find it best, and this may just be my preference, to just listen and not sit there and judge their argument and think, wow, they're just so wrong. Instead, I listen for the truth, because most people, if you listen long enough, know some element of truth that you don't. And you're gonna learn so much more and get so much more out of life from listening to people instead of just arguing with everybody. And I know it's really fun to argue. I love to argue too. But I wish I saw more listening in the libertarian movement. Because when people listen, they hear that tiny little bit of agreement in the person they're arguing with, and they use that agreement. So, for example, say the person that you're talking to supports small business. Well, now you have a launching point to talk about how the government helps large businesses with their lobbyists and everything's super corrupt, and you can go from that point of agreement, and you don't have to worry about getting into this head-butting argument where neither of you want to give at all. So it allows you to see things more clearly. It allows you to be able to talk to people. And one thing that I learned and have talked about a few times, even through Objectivist Girl, is that we are awesome. We just haven't perceived it yet. It's hidden under a myriad of biases that we created to stand in our own way. When we compulsively split ourselves and the world into prefabricated categories, such as good and bad, us and them, real and ideal, we discover we've gotten into serious difficulties. We create problems for ourselves by our custom way of thinking and by the ingrained biases of our perceptions. And so what I'm asking you to do is see more clearly, to give up those biases, at least temporarily, to have a moment of pure and utter clarity, to just see the world and not judge it. Because it will teach you so much. I have learned so much since I started doing that. And it opened my mind to Taoism, in all honesty. So the second thing I want you to do, what I want to ask you to do, is to realize all. This means to see all. This means to meditate, to experience, to listen to others without arguing, to travel, to diversify your friends group, to have experiences outside of your comfort zone so that you can see the parts of the world that are completely hidden to you. When you realize all, you see this beautiful concept of the world from someone else's eyes. Have a little empathy. Put yourself into someone's shoes. See the world the way that they see it, and you will learn and you will taste this beautiful flavor of life that we often miss. The next thing that I ask is to encompass emptiness. This means that you have to become like water, formless, shapeless, neutral. You have to change with change, and most of all, you have to realize the difference between knowledge and wisdom. So what does it mean to flow like water? It's a very difficult concept, but the idea is, if you've ever seen one of my videos, I talk about a man trying to push a boulder up a hill that's too large for him. And he just keeps pushing at the thing like it's going to make any difference if he continues to do this. Physics stands against him. And Ayn Rand says herself, you can fight gravity, but you can't fight the effects of gravity. And so he just continues to try to push this boulder up the hill instead of asking for help or getting the proper tools. And he fights reality instead of seeing it. When you flow like water, you are able to see the cracks and crevices of the world. You're able to see the potential answers to problems that may have irked you in the past. Say it goes against your religious preference. Say it goes against your philosophical dogma. If you close off options, you are not truly being objective. And objectivity, in my experience, leads to intense personal happiness. So the last thing that I want to ask you to do in regards to encompassing emptiness is to realize the difference between knowledge and wisdom. So knowledge is something that is language-based. It's something that you can share. Wisdom is something that is uniquely subjective to you. So what you have is the kind of learning that you can discover through knowledge is not capable of sharing through a wisdom perspective. And you only attain wisdom by your own experience, your own flavor and essence and suchness of life. And as you experience that suchness, you start to gather information about the world around you, and it allows you to live your life in a more fulfilling and happy way. And for those of us who believe that happiness is possible, we want it. We believe that it is the epitome of all greatness, is to be happy. I can't imagine anything more beautiful and wonderful than happiness. And when you realize all, you realize that you are the reason and the purpose for your own being. There's a great quote in Anthem, in Ayn Rand's book, Anthem. And it says, I wish to know the meaning of things. I am the meaning. I wish to find warrant for being. I need no warrant for being and no word of sanction upon my being. I am the warrant and the sanction. Many words have been granted me, and some are wise and some are false, but only 3 are holy. I will it. And what this does, it allows you to reach into that wisdom scope. It allows you to see what is wise for you. What is your path? What are you supposed to be doing with your life? What creates that incredible flavor of existence for you? And wisdom is uniquely subjective to you. However, we achieve that amazing subjective suchness through objective fact. It allows us to look at reality and say, how do I get to where I want to go? How do I get to my happiness? When we look at the reality of things, instead of fighting it with our dogma and biases. And last of all, I want to ask you to dissolve duality. So between subjective and objective, there is no gap. When we view things from this non-dualistic perspective, we can see a very special and at the same time very ordinary harmony everywhere, always. And this is from a Zen book. Like I said, I don't agree with Zen, but there's a lot of truth in it. And so when we look at the world from a perspective of there is no true difference between subjective and objective, we see that they work intrinsically together. And that was one of the things that I mistook when I studied objectivism. I thought subjective is bad, it's bad in every way. And the more that I studied, the more I stepped outside of my biases as Objectivist Girl, I realized that we all do live in our own subjective world where we build our own happiness. And so, how am I doing for time, Nathan? Doing okay? Am I talking real fast? That's probably what I'm doing. Okay, cool. We're good? All right, awesome. So, the last thing I want you to do in regards to dissolving duality is to give up anything that contradicts. So check your premises. Ayn Rand talks about this all the time. If you find something in the world that contradicts and it seems impossible, check your premises, because you probably missed something. So you have to, when you're dissolving duality, you have to look at things that contradict within the world. And normally, it's our own preset biases that are causing those contradictions. They aren't objective. They don't exist. We have made them up in our heads and pretend that this is reality. And so when you meditate, you are able to look objectively at reality and see the difference between what is real and what your mind has made up as your own limitation. So basically what I'm asking you to do is to get out of your own way in order to learn. It's a big step. It's hard. And meditation has helped me a lot with this. And I hope that you will meditate, because the amount of knowledge I have gathered from just like a few months of meditation is better than any book I've ever read. So in conclusion, many people wonder what the key to life is. Most people in this room understand that it's personal happiness. If you don't believe this, I understand, and I hope this speech will help you with your truth. But for me and many others, here, that is our truth. But many of us struggle with knowing how to achieve happiness because we have either failed to define it or are defining it in the wrong way, the opposite way that will bring us happiness. Stoicism has a really great idea that states that happiness is neither joy nor bliss. It's just a steady line of tranquility. Neutrality will make us happier than the highs and lows of seeking joy or suffering. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't enjoy highs and lows. We get elated when something great happens. We get sad when, someone dies or passes away or leaves us. And those are important human experiences. But when you're discovering truth, you need to stay neutral. You need to stay in a place which is unemotional, unattached, because that allows you to see things the way they are without adding your own biases into the moment. So there's a time and place for everything. That neutrality can only be found in the present. That is where happiness lies. It lies in the abandonment of concepts. Concepts keep us from achieving the neutrality that lets us flow like water. And most of all, the personal journey of happiness can only be discovered when our cups are empty. So please just keep seeking truth.
Are you with me? Are you with me?
By the 21st century, the statists had taken over the world. After 9/11, the savage union of the war on terror and the war on drugs squelched the last flickers of freedom. Central banking-backed wars raged. Violence, imprisonment, and theft had become the norm. Not many could see any other way. Hope vanished. But then, when things looked their darkest, something happened. A surprise, and just in time. From the valleys, fjords, and suburbs rose the anarchists. From the cities, factories, and the dark web came the anarcho-capitalists. And from every other nook, corner, cranny, and drum circle, the voluntarists. Some said it was too little, too late. The war had already been lost. You can't change the system, they cried. And the anarchist answered, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. One rule to heal the world, one rule that binds them, one rule sets their moral compass and aligns them. The N-A-motherfucking-P. And with that, they gather again, as they do every year, in Acapulco, Mexico, this coming February for the 3rd annual Anarchapulco. Speakers include Larkin Rose, Jeffrey Tucker, Jeff Berwick, Adam Kokesh, Milo Yiannopoulos, Lauren Southern, Luke Radowski, Julia Toriansky, Roger Ver, Rick Falkfinger, Dana Martin, Judd Weiss, Max Egan, Josie Wales, That Guy T, Anarchy Girl, Sasha Daygame, Barry Cooper, Mark Victor, Trace Mayer, Ian Freeman and Mark Edge, Rosalind Ross, Tim Moen, Dan Dix, Dale Brown, Christopher David, Stephanie Murphy, Derek J. Freeman, Derek Brose, and many, many more. The headline musical act will be Eric July and Backwards. In and around the event will also be the Dollar Vigilantes Internationalization and Investment Summit, Change Media University, and the world's largest ayahuasca ceremony held by Barry Cooper, Ayahuascapulco. Plus, Terry Brock's Fund Your Freedom entrepreneurial course, Adam Kokesh's homesteading workshop, Sasha Daygame's Anarchy in Relationships course, Dana Martin's Free Your Family workshop, and much, much more. And it will all be held the last week of February 2017 in Acapulco, Mexico at the 5-star Mundo Imperial Resort and Convention Center. Go to anarchapulco.com to stake your place in history. The world might just never be the same. Evacuate the state. Brave the future.